And we are back with the next edition of Caught Stealing, the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Baseball podcast here, obviously, at fantasyalarm.com. As always, can I say as always, if this is only the second time that we've done it this
I
year?
mean,
Technically it's 100%.
new name who dis? I don't know.
Yeah,
I
as always,
mean,
with Caught Stealing, Colby Conway at Colby R. Conway. Here with me as always, Matt Selz at the Selz Man. Matt, I know this is a fantasy baseball podcast, but both of us have to be pretty excited coming off the weekend's events.
yeah. First of all, 45-14. That was. I don't think anybody saw that coming. I mean, I probably thought that Houston and Cleveland was probably the most balanced matchup of
Mhm.
the weekend. But good lord, Joe Flacco just had, and then he got breakdanced on his head. Did you see that clip?
Of course, I saw it live. It was awesome.
Yeah, fantastic. Um, and then the Dolphins wanted no parts of the cold weather
Nope.
in Kansas City, so that was great to see. Still got two. As we're recording this, we still have two playoff games left this weekend because they moved the Bills, Steelers, and then watching the Cowboys just get run out of their own building was just icing on the cake. It was just fantastic.
Yep, it was. I had a great weekend. The Houston got their whenever they make the playoffs, you can shoe them in for the Saturday at 4:30 game, and now they
Yes.
made it to the next round. And guess what? They got the Saturday at 4:30 game again.
Hey
Let
man,
me
if it's
ask you.
working, it was working.
Hey, if it's working, it's working. Let me ask you this. So we'll get. Don't worry. We're gonna get to the
It's a
fantasy
baseball.
baseball stuff. But I am in a pickle. See, that's a baseball reference, so I'm bringing
There
it
you go.
back. I am in quite the pickle, Matt. So this weekend, obviously, Houston's going to play at 4:30. At
Correct.
the time we're recording this, we don't know who they're playing yet. Baltimore
Either Baltimore or Kansas City.
or
Yes.
Kansas City. My wife and I are competing in a CrossFit competition this weekend. Games at 4:30 on Saturday. Our heat times for our event are 5:01 p.m. Eastern and 6:46 p.m. Eastern. So we're talking right in the meat of the
Yeah.
game. I have two options the way I see it. Option one is I go radio silent. I record the game on YouTube TV. I shut the phone off and I hope no one, and then when I get back to our Airbnb that night, I watch the game start to finish and hope that no one while I'm walking around says anything or I hear anything about the game. That's option one. Option two, I try to stay, excuse me, as up to date as I can, still record the game to watch start to finish afterwards. Try to stay as up to date as I can after we finish our 6:46 heat, which pushes us probably a little after 7 o'clock. I watch the ending from there on.
That's a tough. Because here's the thing: going radio silent these days is real hard to do because there's no Twitter, right? You probably got to turn off ESPN
Well, I'll just shut off the
alerts.
phone. I'll just shut off the phone altogether. That way I can't see anything. The other problem too with trying to stay up to date with the game is where the competition's being held. Wi-Fi last year was abysmal. I couldn't load a thing.
So I think you have your answer. I think you got to go radio
I
silent and then just hope for the best.
I gotta tell my
And
wife I want
let
no
the folks
updates.
know that you're going radio silent. So if there's an emergency, they see. That's
Yeah.
why I would just turn off the.
They call my wife anyway. They don't call
There
me.
you
They
go.
know I don't answer.
There you
So
go. So I would go. Uh, I would go radio silent.
okay. Well, head over to my X at Colby R. Conway and just do a vote because I'm putting it out there in the ethos. So
There you go.
let me know what everyone thinks. That's the pickle I'm in. I'm not stuck in between first and second base. I'm really, you know, we scheduled this competition. Last year was on Super Bowl weekend, and last year I kind of knew Houston wasn't
Yeah.
making it, so I wasn't worried about it. But
There
this
you
year
go.
was in the second round, a little bit different. But that's my predicament for
By the
the
way,
week.
bringing this back to baseball, interesting deal. Of the four playoff games that have happened so far, all of the football stadiums that the games were hosted in have a baseball stadium directly next door.
Huh.
Houston's is right next to the Astrodome, which is no longer used, but it was a baseball
Technically.
stadium. Dallas's is right next to Globe Life Field or
Hmm.
Park, whichever one they're going with now. Arrowhead and Kauffman Stadium share a parking lot. The idea was, by the way, when they built those, that there would be a dome that would go on tracks. It would just switch between the stadiums when needed.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting fact. And then Ford Field is directly next door to Comerica, where the Tigers play.
There you go. There's your fun fact of the day.
That's interesting.
I'm in a pickle, and you have fun facts. So
There you go.
that's why we are here. But let's go ahead, Matt. We'll put my conundrum to the side. Let's get into a little fantasy baseball talk here. So of course, keep your eye out for any big updates. Wink, wink, wink. Over at fantasyalarm.com. And in the meantime, there are free agent signings still happening. There are some that are relevant for fantasy. There are some that are not relevant for fantasy, but relevant for reality. For example, this morning I updated the Brent Suter signing to the Reds.
Ooh,
And now in fantasy, it's a non-factor.
correct.
In reality, pretty nice depth piece for Cincinnati. So we're writing that all up. Head over to fantasyalarm.com and check out the 2024 MLB free agent tracker. And one of the ones we wrote up earlier in the week, Matt, was the New York Yankees landing right-handed pitcher Marcus Stroman. Yankees had to do something in the rotation. They had to get another arm. We knew they were in on Yamamoto a little bit. We knew they've kind of kicked the tires on a lot. They've looked at Snell a little bit, but Stroman, per value, pretty good deal. And it seems, you look at his numbers for the overall year, and it's from last year, and it's like, okay, but he was dominant through the first, I want to say off the top of my head, I'll look it up. I want to say like 15 or 16 starts. I think it was. He was excellent. So talk to me about the Yankees landing right-handed pitcher Marcus Stroman and how he fits into that rotation.
Yeah, through his first 112 and two-thirds innings last year, basically the first half, he had a 2.96 ERA. Pretty impressive. A 2.05 batting average against. Allowed under a 285 OBP. Pretty nice. Pretty nice. Kept the home runs to a minimum there. So, look, is it a sexy signing? No. But I would argue the Yankees don't need sexy right now. They need dependable. And that's what Marcus Stroman is. Yes. Did he get injured a little bit in the second half last year? Sure. He still made it to almost 140 innings, though. Right? He's never pitched less than 138, 136 innings in a full season since 2016. That's pretty solid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the other thing that I love about the signing. He is a ground ball pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
He is a ground ball pitcher. What do we mean by that? His lowest ground ball rate of his career was in 2021 with the Mets at 50.08% ground ball rate, which means more than half the balls that are being hit off of him are still on the ground. Last year he was at over 57%. He's been over 60% multiple times. He is a ground ball pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to play very, very well in Yankee Stadium and the AL East as a whole. Inning eating mid rotation guy. Maybe number 4 starter, but the Yankees needed innings, right? That's all you need out of a guy right now. If Rodon is healthy, Garrett Cole coming off a Cy Young year, you have the formation of a rotation starting to happen here.
We talked about it. Well, there's two different things we talked about that I'm going to bring up, but we talked about it last year, or I guess it was the year before. Whenever the Yankees made that asinine trade for trading away Jordan Montgomery when they needed starters, a lot of times we talked about it wasn't that they gave up this ace left-hander. It's the fact that they gave up arguably the second most reliable guy in the rotation. Correct. They need, like you said, they need reliability. And for this Yankees rotation, as much as we crapped on Carlos Rodon last year, Luis Severino was banged up at times. This team needs another arm who you can at least
Just
confidently say, yep, the best ability is availability. And that's something
Correct.
that outside of Garrett Cole, that rotation hasn't had in.
Yeah, I've been saying for like 4 years that it's Garrett Cole and like 17 question marks, right?
Yep.
So now there's only 15 question marks. So we're getting better. We're narrowing. And the other thing about Stroman, he's pitched in the New York media market.
Mm-hmm.
He pitched for the, granted, Mets, back page team. Sorry, Mets, but you are. But he put up a 3.02 ERA in 179 innings for the Mets.
Yep.
Why exactly they didn't re-sign him, I don't know. So we'll see. ERA isn't everything, but if you go like expected FIP, he's been around the 3.5 mark the last 3 years. Actual FIP is about the same for those of you that like Sierra, a little higher. So there's that, but you don't need him to be an ace. You need him to eat innings. And that's what Stroman's going to do. And I can't even really complain about the AAV on the deal because it's not that bad.
It's the going rate for pitchers these days. I mean, look at it.
Would I rather have a Imanaga for less? Maybe, but the guy's also never pitched in MLB before, and this guy has. So there's that.
It's the going rate for pitchers. That's what it is. I mean, look, Frankie Montas has thrown like 40 innings over the past 2 years, and he got 15 or 16 million a year. Now,
that's an overpay. But
now I love that one for fantasy. I know we talked about it last week, but that's the thing. You can mitigate going to a hitter's park if you can find a way to avoid home runs, and the easiest way to avoid home runs is to keep the ball on the ground. You can't hit home runs on ground balls. It's like we said last week, this is not backyard baseball. You don't get the ball that goes under the ground and then it shoots out in the outfield.
The pitcher's mound as a skee ball ramp.
Yep, doesn't happen. So I really like the deal. And Stroman's a value at his current ADP. Now I know it's going to go up because he's going to get the Yankee hype behind him.
Correct. The Yankees rotation as it sits right now is Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, Marcus Stroman, Clark Schmidt, and Nestor Cortez. They need another arm.
They need another arm.
Which is why they're asking Blake Snell, I guess, which I'm not I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. I'd rather have Jordan Montgomery back.
Yeah.
Just go Control R and reset the whole thing, because Bader's now a Met, so you don't even have him. Just go get Jordan Montgomery back, and it's like nothing ever happened.
Yeah, I'd agree there. Overall, I like the deal. I'll be curious to see where Stroman's ADP ends up here as we continue to get further and further from the deal. But overall, I do like it a good bit. And again, to put the ground ball rate into perspective, if sometimes percentage is just like, oh, it's half. Okay, what exactly does that mean? If you go look at his ground ball to fly ball ratio for his career, it sits at 2.41, which means he averages nearly 2.5 ground balls to every 1 fly ball that he allows.
Yeah, and his career home runs per 9 is 0.83.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you need in Yankee Stadium, is a guy who doesn't let the ball go over the fence.
Yep. We'd like to see a little bit more strikeouts, as that would increase his overall fantasy appeal. But to his credit, 20+% each of the last 4 years. He can get swings and misses when needed. You'd like to see it a little bit more, but I mean, he's consistently right around 9-10%. So there's some upside there.
One other thing, not that we need to keep hyping Marcus Stroman, but last year, versus lefties, which is where all the power comes in Yankee Stadium, is versus lefties. He allowed a 282 slugging percentage in 75 innings versus lefties. Against righties, to put that in perspective, in 61 2/3 innings against righties last year, he allowed a 394 slug.
Yep.
100 points lower on slugging against lefties. So I think that was actually a very smart signing.
On top of that, one more, not to keep hyping up Stroman more, but for his career against left-handed hitters, 58% ground ball rate, 2.69 ground ball to fly ball rate, fly ball percentage overall, 21%. We'll take that. Like Stroman, hopefully his ADP doesn't get too high up, but after we just spent 6 minutes talking about him, I don't think we did ourselves any favors there, Matt. So let's move to another. let's move to another starter. This one's interesting to me. I'm going to let you go first. Jordan Hicks. At first, I saw the deal 4 for 44 to the Giants. I'm like, okay, I get it. The strikeouts finally came a little bit last year for him. Actually, I should say a good bit. He jumped up to 28%, although after being...
Well, when he's on the mound more often, it's easier to strike guys out.
Now, when he left St. Louis and went to Toronto, the strikeout rate dipped. So that was kind of interesting. But batting average against whip, everything else was pretty much better. However, Jordan Hicks, 4 years, $44 million. Then the report came that they're going to try to stretch him as a starter. I've seen a lot of kind of talk on Twitter, and the reasons are valid. I get it, that his arsenal could actually play well to leading to a starter because he's not just a 2-pitch guy. So I can understand on that one. And there is swing and miss in his game. I have some other concerns, not to kind of tip my hat here on what I'm going to talk about, but Jordan Hicks. But talk to me, money aside. The money doesn't matter. It's $11 million a year AAV. That's completely fine. 4-year deal for Jordan Hicks, who will be 28 in month 9, which is, what is that, September?
Yes.
September. Talk to me about this deal. Mainly the that they are going to try to let him work as a starter in camp?
I mean, the Giants have been known as pitching whisperers for a little while now,
Mm-hmm.
but I think you got to be God to make this work as a starter. I mean, I just don't see it. Maybe Forehand's ID has more faith in his pitching coaches than we do,
Mm-hmm.
given what they've done with turning around Logan Webb and Alex Cobb and Kevin Gausman and all those folks. But the guy is just never on the mound. Like, how are you going to turn a guy who's not on the mound into a starter? I thought job number one of being a starter is getting on the mound. Guy's injury history is incredibly long because he throws max effort. Like, it's not an easy 100. It's like the guy is throwing his arm off to get to 100. So maybe they dial that back. But then the question becomes, if it's not going 100, is there as much movement? Like, if you drop a pitch from 100 miles an hour to 95 miles an hour, it's going to cut the movement. The reaction time is one
Mm-hmm.
thing, but the movement is what makes the pitch less. Like, everybody in the pros can time up a 95-mile-an-hour fastball.
Yeah.
Right? That's job one. If you can't hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, you ain't making it to the major leagues. So it's the movement that makes things not hittable. And I'm concerned that if they stretch him out to a starter, he's not going like he's trying to pace himself. The stuff won't move as much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not going to, I have a lot of, and 11 mil for this risk a year is a little steep.
Yeah.
Hopefully I didn't steal your thunder there. But
no, I mean, we can't, pull numbers out of our, what to make stuff up. But the thing with Hicks is he's a strikeout ground ball guy. I like that. I like that build for pitchers. I know we did the pod many times last year with Brian Bello. We talked about him, or Brian Bello.
Either way.
Whatever.
Red Sox starter. Yeah.
The strikeout ground ball combination is a good one. I like to target that one for fantasy. But when you look at Hicks, I wrote this up over at fantasyalarm.com in the MLB free agent tracker. Go check it out. It is free. So go check that out. He hasn't thrown more than 80 innings in a season since 2017. And that year is when he threw 105 in the minors. And since entering the bigs, his highest is 77 2/3 back in 2018.
As
for
a reliever,
me,
right?
Yes.
He was a multi-inning guy for the Cardinals.
Yes, he's made 8 starts. That was back in 2022 for the Cardinals, in which he posted a 5.47 ERA and 1.56 WHIP across 26.1 innings.
It's kind of the Kyle Harrison problem.
Now, I understand if they made this signing now, so they have time with camp leading up to the season to try to stretch him out a little bit. But let me see if you know this, and if you know this off the top of your head, congratulations, or you're a great guesser. Do you know the most pitches he threw in an outing last year? Now, remind you, he was a reliever every appearance last year. He made no starts.
What, like 27?
37. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of his 65 appearances last year saw him throw 27 or more pitches. That's it. Going back to 2022, his top, obviously, they all came from starts, and they slowly worked him up a little bit. You can see by dates and stuff. So his first couple, I'm going to throw those out there. He had one where he went 5 innings, which was the longest he went as a starter, 77 pitches in that one. His other 2 outings with the most pitches, it took him 82 innings to get through 4, of which he only threw 39 strikes, and 78 pitches to get through 3. Across his three starts, sorry, let me say this. Across his 4 starts, I'm not going to throw it out there. His 4 highest pitch outings, 82, 78, 77, and 68 back in 2022. He had 12 walks across those 4 starts. It's not as simple as you get to say, it's not as simple as a starter going to a reliever where you can say, hey, screw your crappy changeup. It sucks.
Right. Just cut down to 2 pitches, your 2 best pitches, go out there, throw them as hard as you can for an inning, and you're good.
Versus trying to take this reliever, putting him into a starter and say, hey, let's not go max effort. We're going to shift our ideology here because we want you to work deeper into games. I just don't think it's going to work. And honestly, what can the Giants reasonably expect from him? If all goes well, let's say he goes out there, he's Spencer Strider. Okay. He's not, but let's say he is. 110 innings, maybe? Because you
Yeah,
don't want to
because
have
remember,
too much
there's
of a
that
jump
innings
from
jump.
last year.
He had how many innings last year? 70 something?
65 and 2/3.
65. So 35 is pushing it for a jump between.
So that'd be 100.
That'd be 100. Also, let's not forget the state of the Giants rotation. It's not like he's the maybe fifth guy.
Hmm.
Their ace is Logan Webb. Okay, fine. After that, it's Ross Stripling, a guy who couldn't stick in the rotation last year when they had question marks about their rotation last year. Third is Kyle Harrison, a rookie who came up and got a couple of starts late in the year, who still needs a lot of seasoning and hope his walks are under control. Then it's Jordan Hicks. Then it's Keaton Wynn, who is a 26-year-old unproven guy. Now, the Giants, more than anybody, seem to be able to just find these baseball players, pull them up to the majors, and it works out, right?
Yeah.
But Alex Cobb is out until maybe May at best. Robbie Ray isn't coming back till at least July.
Mm-hmm.
That's only two arms. So who are you kicking out of the rotation at that point? Not Kyle Harrison, your top lefty pitching prospect, I would assume. Keaton Wynn and either Ross Stripling or Jordan Hicks. Like, I don't get this
Mm-hmm.
signing at all. I think it's the Giants being cute because they got nothing to lose in a year where they're not going to win the NL West.
Yep.
I don't know, but I'm not touching him this year. We'll see if he's healthy and how it works out, and then maybe next year, but not this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty cheap overall. He's going to be
I would assume
cheap in
so.
draft, but you're only going to get 100 some innings. He'd have to be very, very darn good over those 100 innings to basically make it worth it. I don't know. That's how I see it. Let me pull this up quick just to confirm how cheap he is. We'll go back to January 1st. So only drafts in 2024 per the NFBC. Yeah, he's outside the top 370 picks. So if you want to take a shot there, sure. Just understand you can't get more than 110 innings out of him. That's if everything goes well. That's how I see it. So glad
Which it
we're
didn't exactly do for St. Louis, who's pretty known
right.
for developing pitching.
Right. Glad we are aligned there. That actually took a good bit of time there, Matt. That's good. It's a good little conversation there. So let's talk about this. Getting back to the fantasy baseball mindset. Fantasy football is over. You still may be in some playoff leagues. I get that. So you're going through that, but it's time to make the mental shift from fantasy football to fantasy baseball. So Matt, overall, in general, when you're kind of you're putting the fantasy football stuff away, you're putting away fantasy points per drop back, fantasy points per touch, you're getting rid of PPR, you're getting that all out of your mindset, you're getting ready for fantasy baseball. Maybe it's points leagues, maybe it's roto leagues, you're just dusting off your old baseball research cap. How do you make the shift from playing fantasy football and all the kind of intricacies of that to the fantasy baseball game?
So for me, when I'm starting off in fantasy football, I'm looking at guys for obviously your early draft picks, you're thinking about for the full season, right?
Mm.
But after that, you're thinking about, okay, can this guy get hot for a couple of weeks and help me out? For fantasy baseball, we're looking at dudes for months, right? I want to look at a guy who I can set and forget and not have to work. And then if he gets injured, fix it later, right? I'm not going, oh, this guy's first 3 weeks are an easy schedule, so I'm going to draft him, and then 3 weeks from now, I'm going to go find somebody to replace him.
Yep.
That's not how I'm looking at it. I look at it as a macro level thing, not a micro level thing, right? Football is 12 games, generally speaking, right? Maybe 14, depending on your league size and when playoffs start and whatever. But you're going to have a bye week for a guy, and there's probably a week you're not playing him. So you're maximum looking at 12 games for that guy, right? Baseball, yes, it's 26 weeks. But in each week, you're getting at least 5 games from a guy. So you've got to look for guys that you can get entire seasons out of. You're not thinking short term. You're not thinking, oh, I can draft this guy, and then in week 4, his team has a bye, so we can swap in this. No. We're also getting ready to be patient. Fantasy football, if a dude has 2 bad weeks, kick him to the curb, right? Like, go find somebody else because you don't have time to wait for that guy to sort it out. In fantasy baseball, perfect example in 2019, I believe, Anthony Rendon finished the month of April with 1 RBI.
Mm-hmm.
1 RBI. The 2019 Nats were, again, the team that won the World Series. Granted, they got hot late, but he was a middle of the order hitter, expected to hit about 280, about 25 homers, get you in the 80 RBI, 80 runs scored area, right? Through April, he had 1 RBI.
Mm-hmm.
You know what he finished with? About 80 RBI. I think it was like 79. He finished hitting, I think, about 270 something. He finished in the 25 or so home run range. If this was fantasy football, he starts out that slowly. You're kicking him to the curb. You don't have a choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's the first thing. We're getting used to being more patient. This goes for our people in Discord. I don't want to hear the first week of the season this guy had a bad start and we're dropping him. No, we're riding these people. Get ready to ride them. If they get injured, that's a different story. Okay. If you're unhappy with their playing time early in the season, you got to ride it out and let managers figure out what they're doing, right? So that's the main thing. Obviously, this depends on your league size and your lineup settings and whatnot. The other thing, we're not jumping on prospects as soon as they come up. Like, there's a few. Yeah, I have my top rookies article coming out, right? There are a few that if they break camp, okay, fine. But a dude who didn't break camp and then comes up like 2 months later, I'm letting him sort it out some. So those are a couple of things. It's not like Bijan Robinson who got drafted like 10th overall in fantasy football, right? I'm not drafting Jackson Holiday 10th overall.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to do it. I'm not drafting Jackson Churio that high. So it's a much more patient, long run game than fantasy football.
Patience is the biggest thing. That was the first thing I'm going to call out. Now, to that same point, not being patient isn't always created equal. If a guy comes out the first 2 weeks and hits a $125, let's look into it. What's the BABIP? Is the batted ball, a bunch of those advanced statistics, do they look good? Is he making a ton of hard contact? Like, that's the stuff that you need to look at. And like, there's going to be times where, like, yes, you draft a player, we can't hold on to him for 6 months and hoping that it turns around. Like,
right.
I get that. Now, sure, your fringe guys, your last couple picks, if they have a bad couple weeks start the year, cut them. That's fine. No harm, no foul there. But like, for example, look at a guy like Trey Turner. First 88 games of last year.
I paid a
247.
lot of money for that guy last year.
Yeah, 247, 10 home runs, and 19 stolen bases through the first half of the year. Last 67 games, he had 292, 16 homers, and 11 stolen bases. Like, if you would have, again, this obviously hindsight's 2020. So if you would have sold low on Turner there, you wouldn't have had the standing ovation effect that he got from that point forward. So like, there's things that we have to look into. If you're dropping someone, oh, they've had a bad 2 weeks. Was it really that bad? Let's take a look. Like, what if they, to be example, what if they hit 200 over the last 2 weeks, but they have a 95 mile per hour average exit velocity and a 11 degree launch angle? If you do that for a while, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, your barrel rate's going to be pretty high, which means that you should be hitting about 500 on those balls.
Yeah,
so
and you just take a look. Like, it's not all created equal. Do you have someone like, for example, you're going to see about him in the draft guide, Ellie De La Cruz? What if you come out? Obviously, we're never going to drop him, first of all. But what if he comes out for the first, let's say, 6 weeks of the year, 38% strikeout rate against lefties? He's still not hitting lefties, just like he didn't last year. He now hits 7th in the lineup against lefties. Maybe some of the stuff against righties isn't popping off like it used to last year. Like, we got to look into why certain things are happening. Sometimes in football, it's very simple. They didn't get the targets because it's a bad matchup. They faced Ahmad Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley Jr., and Patrick Surtain in 3 straight weeks. It's very explainable sometimes. Baseball is not explainable.
Game scripts, stuff like that.
Yep. You and I can step up to the plate, and I can hit an absolute rocket, 100-mile-an-hour batted ball right to the right fielder, line drive. You could have a swinging bunt that lands right on the line that they're waiting for it to go foul. And guess what? You're 1 for 1. I'm 0 for 1. I'm the
Yeah,
better
and then you
player.
box score surf and you're like, you suck and I'm good, and that's not at all. But if you actually watch, it's like, oh, he just got a lucky, or the official scorer doesn't give credit for an error when they should have, so now it counts as a hit instead of an out, and
Yep. Patience is a very big thing in fantasy baseball, and you got to ride the line. Like sometimes, it's a matter of, hey, we do have to cut bait because maybe this guy we're adding is good, but just adding someone because they've hit 300 in the past week, if they have a 625 BABIP over the last week, you can ride them, but don't expect them to be on your team for probably another week and a half or 2 weeks. It's coming to an end. Patience is probably the biggest, I want to say trait, but part of me almost wants to say skill, because it is like
it's a
knowing.
skill to know when
Yeah,
to hold them, when to fold them, and when to
that's what Kenny Rogers
like Kenny
said.
Rogers.
Yep.
Didn't know he was talking fantasy baseball instead of
Yeah,
poker, right?
exactly. That's the thing. And the other thing too, for fantasy baseball, we talk about fantasy football. When you look at it for fantasy baseball, there's going to be people that are going to be on a lot of championship teams. It's not going to be the same thing for football, where if you draft Christian McCaffrey, like I think ESPN put it out and it was like 51 or 58% of teams. Like I've seen this on Twitter too, and I'm going to agree with it. League winner doesn't exist in baseball.
Correct.
I can tell you, I had Ronald Acuna and Bobby Witt Jr. on a team last year. I didn't win. Now, maybe that's because Bobby Witt Jr. is the 9th rated shortstop in Major League Baseball for MLB.com. But
MLB
I'm not going to get into the list. I'm
is
not getting
nothing
into
but
it.
clickbait.
I'm not getting into the list. But the league winner is not a thing in
I'm off
baseball.
the catching list.
The lineups are your lineups are way too vast. You're counting many different statistical categories all going into it. Or if you play points, league winner is not a thing in fantasy baseball.
It's really not. It's can a guy bolster a roster? Sure. But like, okay, so here's a good example about league winner and me last year. Okay, in April, I got offered a trade where I traded Lane Thomas straight up for Vaughn Grissom. This was at the time where Vaughn Grissom came up for the Braves because Arcia got injured. Right? So Lane Thomas doesn't have a whole boatload of homers then. He doesn't have a bunch of steals. He's hitting okay. And I have carryover value in Vaughn Grissom and probably none in Lane Thomas. So I make the trade because if Vaughn Grissom can figure out how to play defense, the bat's going to stay in the lineup and whatnot. Didn't work out. Okay. Now, Lane Thomas, had I kept him, instead of finishing out of the money, I would have finished second. Doesn't mean Lane Thomas is a league winner. What it means is I had a good enough team that I was that close in a bunch of categories that if you put Lane Thomas back in, it puts me over the top. It doesn't mean that all it took was Lane Thomas and then a bunch of crappy players. It means the entire roster was very solid. Okay? No one guy is going to win you anything. No one guy is going to lose you anything. Can you pet, like, this is the team I also paid more for Trey Turner than I would have if I had gotten Shohei Ohtani. Also had Aaron Judge, who got injured for like 6 weeks. Right? So you need a complete roster. And just because you're picking first in a fantasy baseball draft and you get Ronald Acuna Jr. doesn't mean that the people picking behind you are going to miss out on talent like they missed out on Christian McCaffrey. Right? It takes an entire roster. It's not just so if anybody approaches me with, is this guy a league winner? I'm gonna just ignore the question. I'm sorry. I hate that term.
And the reason that you're not going to have league winners as much in fantasy baseball, or really at all, think about when you're setting your fantasy football lineup. It's been a while since I played like just a default league, like on ESPN, but it's probably a quarterback, two running back, three receivers,
2 or 3 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex,
kicker.
And then some people play with kickers and defense.
All right, so that's like what, like 9
dudes.
Baseball, you're gonna have a catcher, first base,
hitters usually,
second base, and 9 pitchers,
8 or 9 pitchers,
23
for an entire week, which is More
Yeah.
than one game.
Yep. It's hard to have a league winner or a singular league winner when you're starting that many guys in a week. That's why league winner doesn't exist.
Not even Shohei Ohtani in a league where you can use him as both a hitter and a pitcher at the exact same time, and he's fully healthy and winning Cy Youngs. He's not a league winner.
Yeah. Depth in fantasy baseball, I believe, is far more important than fantasy football. You want the backup pieces, the depth. I get it in fantasy football, but for baseball, it's so massive. So many games
Yeah.
every day per week. You have positions that you have to fill that are more, I think, granular. I think is the term I'm looking for compared to fantasy football. Like
Yeah, think
receivers
about
are
everybody
receivers.
complains about how shallow the tight end position is in fantasy football, which again, I don't think it's that shallow, right?
Mhm.
In baseball, catchers are that shallow. First base is that shallow. Second base is that shallow. You can make an argument that third base isn't much deeper, right? That's half your infield is shallow.
Mhm.
So if you thought it was tough drafting, getting two elite running backs and an elite tight end, you have four positions you got to try to do that with. So that's why not one dude is a league winner. Did Jonah Heim make differences for people? Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. Did who else was a massive mid-year? Yainer Diaz
Mhm.
made differences for people. Did Nolan Jones help some folks out? Probably.
You gain advantages. That's it.
A guy in my league had Acuna and Strider on his roster and did not finish in the money.
Mhm.
If that was fantasy football and you had two of the top 10 dudes, you're probably pretty deep into the playoffs.
Mhm. Yep. And a lot of times for fantasy football too, depending when you get a guy and how they pop off, that's going to matter a lot too. In fantasy baseball, that matters. But again, you have so many spots to fill. One singular guy isn't going to do it.
And
That's
there's
just,
way more moving parts.
yes, I will agree in that. And
Because the
especially,
other thing to pay, if this is like your first couple of years playing fantasy baseball, just because a team calls up a pitcher doesn't mean they're sending a pitcher down. They could send down an infielder that you have that you didn't think was going to get sent down just to get a pitcher, or vice versa, right?
Mhm.
For fantasy football, if a team activates a tight end, it usually means that their other tight end isn't one of their tight ends is sitting, right? It's usually
Yeah.
a one for one. Not always. In IDP leagues, probably more complicated.
Yeah. And when you look at fantasy football too, regardless of what Christian McCaffrey does, it's all going to fantasy football points. I don't know of many people, if any, that play in like a fantasy football like category, if that's even an option. I don't even know if it is.
I don't
But
know. That's a good
but
question.
fantasy baseball, yes, you can play points, and I get that. But if you're playing categories, and maybe this is your first time playing, going back to the league winner thing, you could somehow end up with Aaron Judge, Pete Alonso, and Matt Olson. You're going to win the power category.
But you ain't going to do anything in steals.
But the person that you're playing that has Estri Ruiz, they won that category from you, despite your
Yeah, also if
three
they
league
have
winners, you know?
Luis Arise, you're not getting anything in average or
Yeah.
steals or.
Fantasy baseball is a very deep game that requires patience, which is a trait slash skill. And also once the draft guide rolls around here and is out, you'll see one of the articles is knowing your league setup, knowing your league rules, knowing your league setting. So Matt, let's say someone is maybe a first time fantasy baseball player, to be honest, or they've been playing for a while. Finding a league that does daily and weekly lineups and understanding that
Yes.
is massive because
Correct.
your time investment becomes drastically
Yes.
different.
Yes.
So, in short, daily lineups, you set your lineup every single day. You can obviously in weekly, you can do add
It's not
drops
like
throughout the
DFS
week.
where you're
But
picking a new slate of guys every day. You're dealing with the
yes,
same roster. You're just moving them in and out. So if a guy has an off day and another guy on your bench is playing that day, you can swap them out, or you can get starts from a pit. You can rotate through pitchers to get
yep.
maximum starts.
And then on the other hand, you have the weekly setup where you set your lineup on Monday for that entire week. So you put
Correct.
Ronald Acuna in. Actually, I don't want to do it to Acuna. Let me pick someone else. You put in like
About Ellie De La Cruz. He's
sure.
a platoon dude.
Sure, you put Ellie De La Cruz in your lineup. They start the week with two righties. They have four lefties the rest of the week. You're stuck with them all week. If he gets injured, he's in there. If he's facing lefties and is benched, he's in there. If he gets pinch
Or
hit for, he's in there. So knowing your
Or
league
if a team
settings, it's
or if a team
imperative.
manipulates the IL and they don't call a guy up until Tuesday, you can't put him in your lineup on a Monday.
Yep.
You miss him for an entire week. So there are pros and cons because the weekly ones, you set your lineup once. It takes you, I don't know how long, depends on how many leagues you're in, how in depth you want to do it, how many moves you got to make. Probably only takes about 10 minutes to set a weekly leagues lineup, right?
Yeah.
And then you just watch. You just,
Mhm.
I mean, you might get trade offers. You could, try to pick people up and
Yep.
see, whatnot. But you're really only paying attention, physically moving things once a week.
Mhm.
Daily, way more involved, more control. Although those leagues usually have, move limits per week,
Yep.
pickup limits per week and year. Um, a maximum number of starts from pitchers for the year I've seen, so that you can't just sit there and keep swapping dudes out every single day to get every start possible.
Yep.
And be sure to double check how your league pays attention to, this matters less this year because Shohei's not going to pitch, I don't believe. But two-way players, those are becoming a thing. The Giants have a couple in their farm system right now. Shohei's doing it. I think there's another guy who could post from Japan, maybe in the next year or two, that can do it. So pay attention because some leagues you have one Shohei, but you can only use him as a hitter or a
Yep.
pitcher for that week. Some leagues there's a Shohei hitter and a Shohei pitcher. They're two different players, and you only get those. You can only use them in that particular way. So double check on your league rules, and then there's dynasty, there's keeper, there's redraft, and Colby and I will be in Discord along with Howard Bender and others. Answer your questions. We've got plenty of knowledge to share.
Yep, absolutely. And this is just the beginning of kind of getting getting back into the fantasy baseball mindset. We'll keep talking about this each week moving forward. Maybe next week, Matt, we'll dive into where do you begin with the research? There's so much to look at, so many players. Where do we begin? So that's what we'll talk about next week when we're shaking off the fantasy baseball rust that we might have since we've been head deep into fantasy football for the last couple of months. But Matt, that'll do it for this week. Make sure you give Matt a follow on X at the Selz Man. I'm over on X at Colby Archon. Make sure you check out all the great content we have over at fantasyalarm.com. And once a signing happens, maybe we'll get a Blake Snell signing, maybe Cody Bellinger. We'll get some big signings. Head over to fantasyalarm.com. Check out the 2024 MLB free agent tracker where Matt and I keep that up to date. So get our instant thoughts and analysis on the move, how it impacts our fantasy value and everything. Once again, you can only get that over at fantasyalarm.com and become a member. Join us in the Discord to get direct access to Matt, myself, and all the great folks here at fantasyalarm.com. So that'll be it. We will see you next week with the newest edition of Caught Stealing here at Fantasy Alarm.